This is Friday, March the 19th, in the year 2004, and I am going to interview my brother, Bill Schfer, at his home in Florence, Massachusetts. Bill, if you could just give your name and where you were born, when you were born.
Name, William T. Schfer. I was born on May 23rd, 1940, in the Boston area. I believe it's still Boston. And lived in that area in Wellesley for the first 14 years of my life.
Could you tell me your first connections with Quonnie?
My first connections with Quonnie go beyond my memory. The family had been going to Quonnie since the 1800s, and it includes my mother and father after I was born. My first memories are in the war years when we rented a house. It's down near the shore, and I want to say the Goodale House. I'm not sure that's correct, but it's one of the houses right in the corner down near the shore. And these long steps going up and down to a porch, and I think the porch was raised at a high level because of the frequency of storms, water would come over the dunes and flood the area beneath it. It also was very susceptible, as was shown in the 1938 hurricane, of severe damage. My memories of that are because there was some problems getting to Quonnie in the war years because of the rationing of gas, and it was quite a big deal to save enough coupons to get tickets in order that we would stay there for just a few days. And I say we, it was my mother and I. I don't believe my father was there. He was working. So that's my earliest memory. Shortly after that, we started to rent the house of Seabiscuit, probably named after the horse. I don't know that for sure. Near the pond, which is now owned by the Swarzes, and it had been expanded considerably. A beautiful place overlooking the West Pond and the ocean. So that I remember. I don't know how far you want to get into that, but that I remember almost year by year. So I'll drop it there, and you can ask another question specifically if you wish.
Why don't you just expand on that and just tell me whatever your memories are of staying at Seabiscuit.
The memories were always very positive. We usually rented the house for a month. I believe that my parents couldn't afford a full month, as cheap as it would seem to us today. And my grandmother and grandfather Siemens would kick in for another 2 weeks, so we had a full month there. I liked it for many reasons. One, it was truly a cottage, no insulation. The cellar was dirt floors, and had that particular odor that's characteristic to cellars down there that aren't paved. The rooms were divided, but the walls were not right to the ceiling. And I always had the room closest to the ocean, which I liked, because I remember every year we went down there, I'd lie in bed at night and listen to the waves crash against the shore. And unfortunately, the early days, there was a great deal of noise because the pilots were training from the Charleston Air Force Base, or Naval Base. We used to call them Hellcats. I think that may be an improper name, but they were fighter planes that I think President Bush, the first president, trained there at one time also. There was, of course, the unfortunate circumstances of these planes crashing, and submarines sinking merchant ships out in the ocean, resulting in tar from the oil washing up on the beach. One outstanding memory, it was absolutely common during the war, and for that matter, I think it was probably 2 or 3 years after the war, where every cottage had a can of kerosene out by the door in a rag. You needed to wipe your feet before you went in because it'd be covered with tar. I remember also, to get potable water, you had to go up to the pump in an area which is now around the second base line, the second base spot in the ball field. And I would go up there with a can with my grandmother with 2 handles. I would say a 5-gallon can, but I think that would have been impossible for me at that age, so whatever size. And she knew how to prime the pump, taught me how. Fill up the can full of water, and back we went. The roads weren't paved, but we, at least the kids, never had shoes. Our feet got very tough every year from running up and down the roads that were unpaved. And let's see, what else would I remember? I'm sure there's many other things. We were normally outside a lot, not in the cottage. And I had, and I can't speak for my sisters, but I had a lot of freedom at a relatively young age to wander around Central Beach, in which case friends were made and activities done, not just in our house at Seabiscuit, but in various friends' houses. We would make model airplanes in bad weather, and we would rig up things like underwater cameras. We tried to do that, and diving equipment, which is primitive as you can imagine.
Explain the underwater cameras. You really thought that was going to work?
Well, we thought that the underwater cameras would work, and I think each one was destroyed by water before we actually got the picture taken, but we had the wood and the lead in the compartment for the camera. I don't remember all the details of it. We probably got the idea from one of the magazines that I think were Popular Mechanics or something like that, I'm sure. And I think if we ever did use it much, we would have a hard time dragging the thing up from the bottom of the ocean. It was pretty heavy. But the big thing was, big activity was riding the waves, both with a mattress and without. The blown up rubber mattress, virtually everybody had. And most everybody, too, learned how to ride waves without the mattress, and exactly what point to start, how to judge when you started swimming to catch it. And the advantage of the mattress was you could go out to the big waves when the storms came that you wouldn't dare do, without the mattress. Of course, nobody thought you might fall off the mattress and have a lot of problems, but then again, most of us had a lot of freedom. I think if Mother had been watching us closely, she would have had a heart attack sometimes. But most of the kids got very proficient on this, and I don't know how much time we spent in the water, but I have to say it was a large chunk of time of every day until the years came when it was time for me to start working. And Ann, I'll ask you, I'll stop again and we can explore what I'm missing or what you want to do at this point. Ann wants me to say who I knew during these younger years. Of course, the friends I made and cherish. 3 of these are still in existence today. That's highly cherished at this point. I'm 63 years old. And to be corresponding and talking with friends that many times, some of whom I can't remember not knowing. So these are very cherished friends and memories. Of course, I knew them and their parents, brothers and sisters, and most of the people I had contact with was within our family, the Fisher side of the family. They had a big cottage on the first row by the ocean. It had been moved across that street in the '38 hurricane. And I remember Aunt Edith and Uncle Arthur. Uncle Arthur's existence seemed to be keyed around making ice cream and having the children do the work making the ice cream. And this again was in one of those cellars that had dirt floors and rusty rakes and whatever else you had down there. And Aunt Edith seemed to spend a lot of time in the kitchen and had us picking blackberries and blueberries. And eventually my mother claimed them, the ones that we picked, probably my sisters as well as mine. Made some wonderful blackberry jelly that we used over the course of the winter. And also I was beginning to get into the stage where I was interested in money. And Pete Skipper and I would go out picking and then sell these to various people. What was her name? Mrs. School. I can't remember her first name. Auntie something there. I've forgotten. She was Lula. Lula, yeah, was it Lula? I think. Lula was a cousin of hers, I think. But, most of the people were either the parents or grandparents of the kids that I knew or our own relatives, Brad Fisher and Betty. Another two. Brad built many of the houses there. And it was hard to be friendly with Brad, but I guess we had to manage. He was part of the family. And he did do his work during the various Klondikes we had, so can't complain too much, I guess.
Could you name your friends, too?
Well, the friends, let's see, I'm not good at names, but Pete Skipper is right down the street. And he had two sisters, Kirsty and Vicky. I didn't have much contact with either one, but Pete and I used to do a lot of athletics together, played tennis, explored the pond, and things like that. And we had a pretty good time together. Pete, unfortunately, acquired in college, I think it was manic depressiveness, and I haven't really had any contact with him since. He's tried to initiate it with me, and then he's been involved with a fundamentalist religion. I think Jehovah's Witnesses. So when he knew that I wasn't interested, he cut the friendship. It was fun though in those years, and let's see. Well, Isabel McLeod, we called Ibby, and her brothers. I wasn't as close to her brothers, but Danny and Burnham, and the Swartz boys, Tracy and Philip. Those two and David Colton and I went across the country in my old 49 Ford when we graduated from high school in 1958. I had fixed it up, and the parents held their breath and sent us off. We toured several thousand miles. We had Tracy's guitar, banjo, violin somehow stuck in that little Ford between our legs, and we'd make camp, and Tracy would drive out one of the instruments and kind of draw people in, so we had a pretty good time. So we stopped in a motel once a week to wash up and clean up. This is when we had just graduated from high school. I think Tracy was a year older than us, but I was 18, Philip, I think, was, and David also. I mentioned before I've had contact with Tracy and Philip with some gaps, but we managed to stay in contact. David is the last soul. We have speculated on his demise in New York City, as we believe he probably was experimenting with drugs and things, and just had those kind of contacts in New York. We haven't heard from him at all. Let's see, going back further. Again, I'm bad with names. Ruth Vars. Ruth was, she was a good friend of Isabel's, Ibby. And sometimes the three of us on rainy days would get together and play cards all day long. Let's see, I just jogged my memory. I probably have several more in mind. And yeah, Mickey Romney, we never were too close, but she was part of the gang. Betty Byrne was the busybody of the crowd. She's had an interesting life since, which I won't bother to put on this tape. Let Isabel know it. Very interesting life. Let's see. Jeff Long and that's Jeff's brother's name, who has the house down there. Steve Long, yes. Jeff and Steve. We did a lot of athletic stuff together, a lot of softballs. Jeff took the Sunday softball game deadly serious. He played the role. He chewed tobacco and did his appropriate spitting so everybody would know he was a tobacco chewer. And I think he kept batting averages and whatever silently. So anyway, the Sunday ball games for him was the highlight of the week. And he kind of made it that way for many of us, too. We all looked forward to it. It was originally a men's son and father's game. And eventually it became more competitive with the ages closer. I guess now they have it as married and unmarried or something like that. But it started in the field in back of our house. And I believe it was 1954. The Thorpes donated the land and then changed the donation of land to near the tennis courts, which was very nice of them. I'm sure it's very expensive land. As I said, originally the ball game was father-son, and literally many of the positions were exactly the same. So in other words, if I played third base, my father would be playing third base. Someone else, the same thing with pitcher. I think one of the McLeod boys pitched and their father pitched on the other team, and Jerry Fogarty and Mr. Fogarty. Mr. Fogarty was a hell of an athlete, played shortstop in college, Holy Cross he played for, and made that game interesting, just an outstanding athletic ability. And let's see, who else played on that? Charlie Bowers played with us, Ruth's brother.
Do you have any memories of Charlie?
Charlie was a couple of years older than me, and they kind of had their own group of boys. They didn't exclude us, but they had their own interests, which were more, I don't know how to say, just different than many of us that are 2 or 3 years younger. There was no animosity, and there was no exclusion. We'd sat together on the beach a lot. And I knew Charlie mainly, I think, through those ball games and sometimes sitting with him on the beach. Ruth was my age, and so I knew her much better. And I know Charlie was smart, and I guess he ended up as a professor out in the West Coast someplace. But I didn't have a lot of day-to-day contact with him. Don't forget, until 1954, we were there for a month. And a month goes by very, very quickly. So you tend to have a fairly narrow focus with friends. But when we built our cottage, which I believe cost a grand total of something in the order of $4,500. No, it wasn't either. It was more than that. I think it was $6,000. The house in Wellesley was around $4,000. But for $6,000, we had our own cottage, and we were there more. But then again, that was the era when I started working too. So again, the friendships were good, but they were somewhat limited in number.
Now, you mentioned exploring the pond with Peter Schfer. Now, that's did you actually do things like sailing and that type of thing?
Well, I should confess, exploring the pond wasn't done just with legs, through all the swamps, but we liberated a few boats here and there, and did our share of rowing and a little bit of sailing. We tried to calculate it when the owners weren't being around, and we were quite successful at that, except for one time, and I think it was a boat we had, no intentions of destroying it or anything, but we were just kids, and we just using this, for the afternoon or for a few hours. One kid in the group, what was his name? Neil Donovan, tended to be destructive. And I'll go into that again in a minute. But as long as he wasn't present, we had no qualms about rowing in a boat that we were going to return it. The owner was quite upset and corralled us off, hit our bikes, took us back home to each mother and complained, and the mothers weren't particularly upset about that because they knew we weren't going to steal it or harm it or anything, and basically shrugged their shoulders. I think they thought they were going to put us in their rooms for the rest of our lives or something. But we were looking for, lobster boys, the markers, and anything that was of interest, particularly after the 54 Hurricane Carol. It was a treasure house of destruction of things that we found that have absolutely no use to anybody but us.
That's what?
I remember parts of boats and the bowling alley. It's parts of the bowling alley, and God only knows what else. I remember our neighbor lost. Apparently, it was a boat worth some money. It was a particular kind of, it wasn't a rowboat, but kind of boat like the old whalers use, I think it was. I forgot exactly the name of it. And we told him we found an old boat hidden away in the marshes. What was his name across the street? Yeah, Mr. King, that's right, yeah. Funny guy he was, but so we took him out through a long trip of wading through marsh, and it was quite strenuous, actually, and it was not his boat. And he just turned around and left, never said thank you or anything. That was the kind of guy he was. So we both resolved that, I think it was Pete Schfer and I, and we both resolved that if we found another boat, we weren't going to mention it to him. So, for all the years I was there, I never once went inside their house. Never, not one time. It shows a strange attitude.
And they never bought any blackberries.
They didn't. Okay, Ann says they didn't buy blackberries or gladiolas. Yeah, the gladiolas are an interesting business. When I forget exactly, I think I was just 14, and one of the carpenters, you'd never guess, he grew prize gladiolas. And I struck up a deal with him where I'd sell him. He'd deliver them in the morning in a big pail, as many dozen as he could, which happened to bloom that day or that morning. And so I talked him into saying, why waste them? Why don't you, I'll sell them for $1.25, and I'll keep $0.25 and, give you $1. And he was quite excited about that. And he did that as long as the gladiolus were in bloom. And it wasn't much of a sales job because once the word got out, people were coming to me for orders. I didn't have to knock on many doors. I think I could have booked the whole month. Of course, I didn't know how long they'd last or how many he would be able to deliver on a given day. So it was all qualified. Some people tried to give me little bribes so they'd be on the top of the list, but I didn't do that, and I just did it to my favorite people and gave them the first chance. I'd take a few dozen and then let them take the pick of what they wanted. I've mentioned about blueberry picking and blackberry picking. I preferred blackberry picking because you could fill a quart box very quickly. Blueberries, it took forever. And one time I forget how this developed, but I was in my bathing suit, and Aunt Edith was going to go blackberry picking and asked if I wanted to go along. So I had some slippers on, I guess, or something, and a bathing suit, and that was it, and went blackberry picking. And little did I know that those little briars were picking at my body. Not really much to hurt, but it made little indents in the skin. So after picking, I went down and headed for the shore and dove into the ocean. And a few minutes later, I came out. I could barely move because, of course, the salt got into all those little places that were picked by the briars and thorns. And I walked home like it was some kind of a ghost. One slow step, my arms were extended out, and I told my father what happened, and he laughed and said, "Come here with me." Took me down to the base of Seabiscuit, and there was a shower, which of course was fresh water. It wasn't potable water, but it was fresh. And tossed me in the shower, and sure enough, it got all the salt out, and I felt like a new human being a couple of minutes later. But we had enjoyed picking and selling them for money, and as I think I mentioned before, Mother took blueberries by the bushels. Everybody contributed. I think the whole family, my father was particularly interested in picking. Not like he could have spent his life doing that. And Anne says meditative. It probably is true. And Mother would put them in some kind of a cloth bag with a certain amount of water. I guess you'd boil them and put them in a cloth bag and squeeze the juice, pure juice. And, that was good blackberry jelly. And it lasted, I think, most of the winter for a morning toast. You couldn't get any better than that. I think that one of my memories is if Mother first did it, she squeezed with her bare hands. And I think it took her, I don't know how many weeks to get rid of the purple stain that she had acquired by not using rubber gloves of some kind. But, let's see. I'll cease for a second and see if we can want to go in another direction.
I don't think so. If you could just tell me a few stories about going quail hogging.
Back to the pond. It's now called Quonnie Pond. West Pond's on the other side of the beach. Quonnie Pond is bigger, and it extends over as far as Weekpog, where the houses were bigger and more expensive up until recent years, where trophy houses came to Quonnie in full force. We always liked to get the hunt for the blue shell crabs on our own. Many times without being told, would come home with certain numbers of blue shell crabs. And what we'd do is at least what I would do is I would go over to the fish's garage and help myself. They didn't mind, of course. They helped myself to nets to catch them, and also the clam rakes, which you scrape the bottom of the under the sand, under the water, until you hear the noise of the rake hitting the shell. Pull up the clam and using some common sense, actually it's a quahog, and tossing them back if they were too small. There were no restrictions, no licenses or anything required in those days. I don't know when it became a necessity to have that license, but certainly is a good thing to limit the amount of productivity that comes out of there every year. And of course, the environment has changed a lot in the pond, from my knowledge. When I was young, it was before the civil engineers from the Army Corps of Engineers came in and made the channel bigger and more permanent. When I was smaller, you had to, if you were sailing out of the pond, you had to know the time of when the tides were, because at low tides you weren't going to get back in with any boat. And for some reason, I guess part of it being money, we never took up sailing. I don't know of too many kids, if any, that did. Anyway, it was always pleasurable, and I even remember one time, one of the few pleasurable things with Brad Fisher, he had a rowboat, and we went out there, and a rather comical thing happened. I was small. He asked me to push off when we were at the dock, and I had hold of a pole and didn't get back inside fast. I didn't let go of the pole fast enough. I ended up being stretched out by the boat and the pole. And he and Betty frantically rowed back in quickly. Of course, it was not any serious thing. The worst thing that could have happened is I would have fallen in the water. But anyway, sometimes we went out doing this because we had a clam bake schedule, a family clam bake schedule, which made a lot of more fun. Everybody was coming from every place, and they all had their own chores, and I was one of the ones who volunteered to go quail-hogging and blue shell crabbing. And Brad had the construction business, so he had the wooden barrels. And apparently, at least he thought he knew. I guess he did. He and his father seemed to know everything about this. And they would gather seaweed and construct some sort of smoldering fire under the barrel, layer the seaweed on top of various things were being cooked in the right sequence. And today I don't know what the sequence is, but the lobsters and the quahogs, many of the quahogs Aunt Edith would make fritters from, but those were also in there. And another layer of seaweed, and I don't know what else, and corn in there, and Lord knows what else, but I guess it must have been 2 barrels at least, and plenty of food, plenty of people. And again, Uncle Arthur sat on a little bench in the garage, enticing people to turn the handle on the what do you call it, the ice cream maker, that had the correct kind of salt and ice in it, and he made peach ice cream and we actually made it. Chocolate and peach and vanilla, I think, were the 3 things he used to make. So again, there was nothing destructive intentionally about the quahogging and blue shell crabbing. The environment, I think, was severely affected by the Corps of Engineers when they let in, more water, more salt water. It obviously changed the salinity and the environmental atmosphere. I was missing from Quonnie for many years after that, and I got older and had jobs and went in the service and so forth, so I can't exactly compare. I don't know exactly how much it was affected, but I'm sure it was severely affected. The other thing that I didn't mention before, the kids formed their own little cliques. They're usually by age. There's usually about a three-year span in age when they would gather on the beach with towels. And so the younger kids had their group, and we had a group, and the older kids were not so active, and many of them, as I say, were by this time were out working and doing other things. But there was a few in the group that were practical jokers, I guess you call them. And we would gather at night, as we did every night, at someone's house to do something, play cards or wander around, and we'd play practical jokes. One destructive person in the group, we tried to calm down, in fact, disassociated ourselves if things got out of hand. The intention was not to destroy property, but just to have some fun. The things that we did were, one guy had a Confederate flag he flew on the front, and we lowered the flagpole. Somebody else was causing a problem. We put a dead rabbit in the mailbox. I'm trying to think of some other things.
Do you remember whose mailbox?
No, I don't, actually.
Did you have a vendetta?
I don't think there was anything that bad. It's just maybe we did it to see the reaction of whoever was opened the box, you know. At least it wasn't a live snake or something like that. One time, Neil Thorpe, who was another one of the group, and this Neil Donovan and I decided to camp out all night on the beach. But the two Neils were a bit on the destructive side, and I held my breath. And we, I don't know what the hell we did. Little things here and there. One where I woke up Jerry Fogarty, who mother wouldn't let him participate in this. Woke him up, whispering in his bedroom window, and kept on going. Ended up in front of Howie Randall's house. Howie was an older guy, older fella, older than us, and his parents were there. And in his front yard was those ducks you buy for ornaments, the mother duck and the little ones. And Neil Donovan decided we were going to put the ducks up on the roof of the house. And I said, "What? Oh my God, if you get caught up there, what are you going to do?" But anyway, there was a convenient back porch over the garage, stairs, and the roof was slanted at such that you could tiptoe over the roof, and so all the ducks were lined up on the peak of the roof. And just as we got through, they woke up. And we were all bound from there, and we took off down that road. I think we set records for 200-yard dashes, bare feet and all, and disappeared. And we never heard anything more about it, except, of course, the next morning we went to look, and sure enough, the ducks were still there. Hopefully it gave somebody a laugh. And I think the reason they ended up on the roof is Neil Donovan wanted to break them in the road, and I said, "No, we're not going to break these. He says, we're not here for destructive things. We're just here to have some fun." And I guess it's fun. It didn't harm anybody. Someone put a garden hose and turned the water on somebody's cellar, which was really just a garage. But that's where it stopped for me. I would not participate in that kind of thing. I just didn't respect that. And a lot of times if that happened, they wouldn't tell anybody who it was. You could only suspect who it was. So nobody could squeal. So, okay. alluded a while ago about Mother renting this place, a Goodale house, I believe it was, for a very short period of time during the war and saving up gas rations to get down here. My memories of the war years are not vivid because I was only 5 when the war ended. But I do remember the drone of the planes and the pilots' training. And it was constant. It was like it was rhythmic sound. One, there'd be a space, and then another noise, a drone coming over because the second one was launched and so forth. Very even, and it got so you could sleep over the noise. One of the memories I do have is one day in August 1945, I was 5, and all of a sudden it became quiet. And the quiet, I noticed immediately. And I asked my parents, why is it suddenly so quiet, It was like it wasn't right, that things should be noisy. And they said the war had stopped. And I guess they grounded all the pilots. There was no sense in risking anybody's life when the war was over. In later years, I did use it again for a while, but I don't remember why or anything. Probably the Korean War started it up again at some point, but I do remember taking walks. I guess it was with my grandmother, and everything was pitch black. I guess people must have honored the lights out requests. And as Anne has documented many stories about what's happened at the beach during the war, I won't reiterate those because it's all second or third hand. But I don't think there's anything else of any significance. I could just repeat what I've learned from other people, but none of us again. I think that would probably